All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Big Time Hoops, the podcast. And I throw around the term big timer a lot, but we really do have a big timer today, ladies and gentlemen. Known as a coach, now an author, book on the way. We got Coach Joanne McCallie joining us on the podcast today. Coach, how are you today?
Good morning. Doing great. A little bit, not great weather here down in North Carolina, but it's a great day anyway.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask too. So obviously not coaching at the moment, and that may be up in the air. We don't know what the future holds, but where's home base? Are you still going to settle down in North Carolina? Is that home for you?
Yeah, we built a new house. My husband and I, kind of a house we've been wanting to build. My husband is a 2-handicapper in golf. If anyone needs a good golfer, John is the person to ask. And we have built a house on a golf course here after kind of waiting 12 years to do that. So this is home base. I'll be doing a lot of speaking through Zoom and then eventually in person and traveling. And if you've been to this area, Raleigh-Durham is one of the hottest areas that people are moving to now, mostly because of the quality of life, of course, and the Raleigh airport's very easy. There's a simplicity of things here that you can avoid in other places.
It is a great place. My brother lives out there in Wilmington, so I've been down there a couple of times. Okay. I've flown in through Raleigh, and it's a great area. If I could be anywhere else and pick the right place, that's the place to be, I think. So
definitely.
And we talked a little bit before we started recording here about the book coming out. So it's due out in February, and I wonder, as an author with a book coming out, like what's more nerve-wracking, like waiting for the release date and seeing how it's going to be receptive, or is it more nerve-wracking preparing for a national championship game? Like what's more nerve-wracking for you?
Well, I guess. I mean, a national championship game is so awesome because there was like 30,000 people there and your team was so ready for that moment. I'm not sure, coaching a national championship, I'm not sure it gets any better than that. This is a national championship in kind of a long-term kind of way. I'm happy for the book to come out. February 16th is my mother's birthday.
Oh, okay.
So there is significance. The book is dedicated to mostly my mother. My father as well, because he passed during the writing of the book, which was a stunner for us with, being one of those families looking through the window kind of thing. My father also being a captain and a pilot was the best reader in the family. And so it's very, I've been challenged to think about him never reading this book. It's added a very heartfelt, I suppose he could take a look, from his vantage point. But it's been a heartfelt thing for this whole writing of the book and also to be a standalone author. My first book was co-written with Rob Rains, and Choice Not Chance I love, and it's a fun book. It's more basketball driven. Secret Warrior is really the whole story, right? It's every bit of my life, 28 years, 25 years ago, being diagnosed with bipolar, the challenges that brings. And I write it standalone with a publisher, and I get to call myself a Maine author. And you can't begin to know that is an incredible feeling to be a Maine author in particular. I mean, Stephen King kind of set the bar, Okay, so it's not at like that level, but there's just sort of a peace knowing I've been able to write something that I've wanted to write for some time.
Yeah, and so that's got to be a great feeling knowing that it's done and it's ready to come out and stuff like that. But like, what are you dealing with now in terms of stressors? Because you mentioned release dates, publishers, talking to all these different people. Like this is like got to be a whole new ballgame for you, right?
Yeah, it's wonderful to be able to set my own schedule. I'm an avid tennis player, and we're playing outside, all year round here. And so I'm an avid weight lifter, workout person. Okay, so I'm probably in the best shape of my life at 55, which is really kind of fun. So I value exercise. It's very important to our mental health, mine as well. And, taking walks with the dog, like having certain appointments with my girlfriends, making clear appointments to balance my schedule. And that's a big time of what I do. I am the Zoom queen. I do lots of Zoom. And I even had the wonderful experience of my first consult with a student athlete yesterday. A part of this is being able to be that phone a friend. I'm known as a coach, obviously. And this young woman's mother, of course, this young woman has a mental health case within her family. And she was asking coping skills to dealing with that as a survivor, because there are survivors of families with an individual with mental health. And so I spent about 45 minutes with her, and that's actually one of the things I'm going to do is move towards a podcast, get appropriate sponsorship so I can actually coach all these people, not just students or student athletes, but coach people and try to offer what I've learned beyond the book. The book's a story,
Right.
and then there's a lot of learning to take place after the book.
So it looks like you got the kind of the future lined up with the book, the podcast. You're an author now. Can we officially say no longer a coach? Are you retired? Is this just a sabbatical? Like, do we have like a title we can give you for right now?
You can give me a title of I believe in freedom and I believe in any opportunity. So you can't give me a title. I could coach again. I could. I think I guess this is a sabbatical. I think that's fair enough to write.
The word. We'll go with that. We'll go sabbatical.
I'm on a sabbatical, and I don't know. I just like you. I don't know what the future brings, and I don't try to guess it.
Okay. So I want to come back to the book towards the end here. I want to take our listeners on a little journey. For those that don't know your story, I want to kind of go back and hit on some things and find out how we got here. And you mentioned your father. He was a pilot in the Navy, correct? And that's how you wound up in Maine?
Yes. My father was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, and Dad had a wonderful 20-plus year career. We lived all over. I was born in Monterey, California. And he was all the Navy spots: Corpus Christi, Texas, Garden City, New York, Jacksonville, Florida. My brother was born in Bermuda. My sister was born in Rhode Island. And my mom is very British, still is to this day, very British mom. And she decided that when we moved to Brunswick, Maine, we moved there, benefited from living in Maine, small town America, then shifted to Jacksonville, Florida, and my mother was not very pleased with the surroundings in Jacksonville, Florida, Orange Park area. And so literally my mom moves us back, which we benefit from so many things. Small town America, lots of support, especially for girls basketball. And my dad has to commute from Jacksonville, Florida to Brunswick, Maine.
Wow. Hopping
on a P3 or cargo or something, I'm not sure, from each weekend, coming home on a Friday, leaving on Sunday night. So we had a very interesting, not to mention the deployments, father gone for 6 months at a time. He did Antarctica and other places. And so my mom made quite a commitment to raise us in Maine. And I really feel like I'm a Maine native, even though I wasn't born in Maine. Yeah, you have to be born in Maine to be a native.
That was going to be my next question. Are we allowed to claim you as a Mainer? Because technically you weren't born here, but you spent your high school years here. So can we claim you as a Mainer? Is that okay?
I'll be very upset if I'm not claimed. And also, my kids were born in Maine.
Okay.
So both my daughter and son were born in Bangor, and doors down from each other, right down the hall from each other. So that emboldens us. The thing that complicates us is my husband's from Tennessee, so that's an ouch. But I come home to Maine. My whole family's in Maine. I'm the only one that scooted out. So very much I'm a Mainer, yes.
And obviously you had a great basketball career as a player as well, which we're going to get into here in a second. But being in a military household, how did that kind of shape you as a ball player? Like what are some maybe some good habits, some bad habits? What is it about that upbringing that kind of helped you progress as an athlete?
I think that having to make new friends, I was always the new kid. And that was an interesting concept. When I was young and we were moving to all those places, it was a constant newness. And my mother also took us to England. So each year for 7 years straight, I was enrolled for a month in England. And that was funny because their teaching methods were a lot more severe. I mean, you could get slapped with a stick. They were tough. I mean, very, very tough. And often the education there, I'd get ahead, and I'd come back to the United States and I'd be ahead of things. But when I went to England, I'd be behind. And so they'd keep me after for all hours. And I remember just the challenges I had as a child trying to balance those two educations, trying to find sports and just really relying on myself because I kind of had to. I mean, change was imminent and I had to find a way to make it positive, as did my siblings. So it's an interesting background, I guess, for and I'm talking grade school, we did not keep going to England once I hit like sixth grade. My mom planted us in Brunswick, Maine. So I benefited from being there from sixth grade all the way through high school.
You mentioned too, one of the benefits of settling down in Maine, small town Maine, was what basketball allowed you to do. So you would have been coming up right after Title IX when things got better for girls, but it's a little bit different than what it is now. What do you remember most about basketball in terms of opportunities that were available to you, resources, camps? Like, it's obviously a much different game now, but what do you remember most about your basketball upbringing down there in Brunswick?
Oh, it's easy to answer that. The mentors and coaches, the late Alan Graffam, he was my junior high coach and taught me how to shoot. We used to do things like travel to games to scout other teams. My high school coach, Fred Kerber, used to pile us in his camper, and we'd drive to Oxford Hills and play summer games and then come home and find a lake to swim in and, cruise by McDonald's. There are no cell phones, no internet, nothing to distract you from just being together. And we had great teams in high school. I mean, our junior high team, not that you have any kind of state championship, but my eighth grade year, we were like really good. Okay. Coach Graffman did a great job with us, and he was setting us up for Brunswick High School, which was Coach Kerber. And then we constantly, went to the Western Maine final or to the state tournament. We could never get by Westbrook. That was Lisa Blaze. Archie Mnuchin was coaching that team. Back in the day, I went to Taiwan on an all-star team from Maine, and we competed in Taipei. And Chris Smith was a fabulous man who had put together the JC Best League in Portland, where you played outside, and there were guys' games and women's games. And so there was a lot of community cultivation. There was a lot of people caring about sport, and basketball is pretty popular. I mean, they say Indiana is a great, basketball state. Well, I'd put Maine right up there. Maine right. Folks love their basketball.
Yeah, and I always like looking back at the old photos from the old tournament days because, I mean, obviously the capacity hasn't changed. There's the same amount of people that could get in then as now, but it just looks like it was packed. Entire towns came out and stuff like that. What do you remember most about the tournament? Obviously, some heartbreaking games. I did some research. I saw you got upset a couple years in a row. But what do you remember most about those tournament games as a player? Because you mentioned just the incredible atmosphere and just support for the girls' game here.
Well, our teams are fabulous. If I recall, my freshman year, we lost to Westbrook in the Western Maine final in the Portland Civic Center. I just can remember a battle. My sophomore year, I think it was Westbrook again. I can't recall, but I remember my junior year, we played Portland High School. Yep. And that was a team that we had never played. And the physicality, I mean, getting back to Ed Feeney and his reputation as basically beating up teams, I get a new concept on that because Lizzie Pelletier and Carolyn Brooks, people that ended up being on that all-star team to Taiwan. Remember Lisa Blaze, Maureen Burchell, we were all on Biz Houghton. We were all on the same team eventually in that summer, the summer after my sophomore year, I believe. But anyway, so I got beat up, just beat up in that Portland game, and they won. And I was like, wow, this must be the difference between Brunswick ball and city ball. Portland was such a city to me. And then the real upset, that wasn't an upset. The real upset was my senior year. I believe that was Thornton Academy and Katie Curtis. And that was such a credit. Katie Curtis is such an immensely talented person beyond basketball, a musician and all these things. And that was in the expo that I remember. And that's where my career ended. And I was on my way at that point to Northwestern. And I think they all hurt. I mean, see how I can remember all those hurting games?
I didn't want to bring them up in too much detail because I didn't know if they still hurt after all these years. But
I mean, you never want to get out of the state tournament. So I never walked away with a state title. And of course, my nieces, Allie Clement just with her teammates at McCallie just collected gold balls, and Sarah Clement, my niece as well. So I don't know if they really appreciate those. I don't know if they appreciate how hard that is to do. So our family's been enjoying basketball for many years, and Maine support has been incredible. And I felt very loved, supported, and raised in a great community and also in a great state. I mean, I remember meeting George Mitchell back in the day.
Yeah.
Angus King and Mary Herman are from Brunswick, and think about what he's doing. Now it's, gosh, he's doing a lot of good things. I remember, Stephen King meeting his wife Tabby at Supporting University of Maine when I coached there. Like Susan Collins and Olympia Snow came to a game. I'm very apolitical in nature. Coaches are really apolitical.
Right.
But what I'm saying is the pride in Maine people. There's an immense pride in Maine people trying to do national things and somehow bring it back to Maine.
I like that right there. And you mentioned how you went out to Northwestern, but there's a small footnote. If you look you up online, if you look at your Wikipedia page, there's a note at the very, very bottom, and it's very, very discreet. And I don't know why there's not more detail about it, but you were Maine's first ever parade All-American, only one of two. So what was it like being named an All-American? And I want to know, what did you get for being a parade All-American? Like, was there like a gift bag? Was it like free? Like, what was the case? A trophy?
Was Cindy? Who was the other one?
Ashley Simino, I think her name is, from McCallie.
Well, that parade thing is very political, first of all.
Yeah.
But no, that was a big realization for me. And by the way, you got to watch out for Wikipedia. Like, that stuff's not always good, right?
Well, I mean, it's in there, but it was at the very, very bottom. I was like, that should be at the top. Like, being an All-American is a big deal.
Well, I mean, there's some things that like don't even have my Michigan State career. Like, I don't know, some of that stuff they can just create is wild.
Right.
But getting back to that, it was a great thrill to be in Parade Magazine. But I was prideful, and I was the last name. So there were 40.
Yep.
And I was 40th, and they spelled my name wrong. And so I was like, oh, come on, and that was a fun year, if I remember, because we're friends now. Missy Belanger, she was named the best player in the state by the Bangor Daily News or something. And I was absolutely furious because how could I be nationally ranked and then not the best in my state?
Yeah.
And the Bangor Daily did that great. I mean, they really covered things really well. So don't get me wrong, I love the Southern Maine and the Portland Press and Mike Lowe and all those guys. But what I'm saying is that they had some monopoly on what the state team was.
Yeah.
So I was first team, but I think it was Missy that beat me out. And I was horrified by that. I was like, in the book, I talk about that really briefly. And I said, well, that was my first example of politics or things that didn't make sense.
I'm guessing it kind of lit a fire in you, though, right? I'm guessing that's just you internalized that as motivation and inspiration as you kind of progressed along and went to Northwestern.
I think that it just, as my mom said, I mean, get over it kind of thing. I mean, get over those things. They don't matter. It's who you are, what you're going to do. And I think the interesting thing about my Northwestern choice just was that my first recruiting letter came from Duke.
Oh.
Okay, so my very first recruiting letter was from Duke. And Duke was always on my mind. And it came down to Duke and Northwestern as my final two. And, my mom, again, just a strong leadership force in my family. And she felt, she wanted everything for her daughter, like everything, academically, private education. In her mind, a private education was the way to go, coming from England and her upbringing. And so all these other schools were, discarded, right? Everything had to be a private school.
Right.
Boston College, Holy Cross, Northwestern, Duke, Georgetown, things like that. And she came on that trip, and at Northwestern, they just really, they showed her Chicago, the sophistication of Chicago and the lake. And they had my mom completely sold. And then she did go on the trip to Duke because I think she was sold.
Yeah.
And so anyway, she kind of let me handle Duke on my own, which I enjoyed. That was really positive. But I got the sense that I would come around, like Duke would somehow be a part of me. It was a weird thing that I wasn't going to go to Duke, was going to go to Northwestern, but I always kind of wondered about the circle back to Duke. So, your parents, and I was one that, I admired my mother. I admire my mother and admired her. When she kind of said, I like Northwestern, I was like, okay. I just wanted to get back to regular life.
Yeah.
The recruiting life got old. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go to Northwestern.
You've spent a lot of the last 30 years recruiting yourself, trying to bring players to your program. Is there anything that you took from what Northwestern did to you to get you to go there that you used in your recruiting pitch moving forward? Was there something special that they did in terms of just reeling you in?
I think in recruiting, it's important to know the family, and I think it's important to know who the decision makers are.
Oh,
I think
okay.
in recruiting me, I was pretty confident young person, but I really wasn't the decision maker. And I think that Northwestern got on that quick. I really enjoyed fall soccer. See, I was in a fall sport. And so I played three sports. I played soccer, I played basketball, I played softball. Somewhere in there, I think I ran some track. And so for me, I really wanted back to my high school. I wasn't, one of these people that were like, oh, I want to kind of get that out of the way, the college choice thing. And so I think it's important when you're a recruiter to generally know decision makers and to figure out who they are and to kind of find, and decision makers can be many people, and to be able to sort through that kind of communication. And I think that's a lot to do with recruiting.
Okay. It's obviously worked because you've had some great recruits over the years, which we'll get into here. But going to Northwestern, obviously stepping up a step, going from playing Class A Maine girls basketball to Big Ten basketball. What was the biggest adjustment for you? There had to have been at least an adjustment period, or maybe, kind of starting over and having to earn a spot versus always being the best player in the team here in Maine. What was the biggest struggle for you?
Well, I liked Northwestern so much that I didn't really look at the roster that was full of guards. It had a great roster, great people, but like anything else, you're one of many very good players. And I still encourage people. That's one of the things. I think I still would have gone to Northwestern. However, the roster was full of guards.
Yeah.
And so I had to really compete, not only at a great school in the Big Ten, but it was just harder. And when women ask me today, I ask them to think about where they can impact a program right away and to look at the rosters and get a sense of balance and fit, because a lot of coaches don't share totally what's going on.
Right.
You have a transfer coming in, know the roster, know how you fit, know what kind of impact you're going to make. I was lucky. I played a lot as a freshman. I think I started as a freshman some games. Played a lot. I played a lot sophomore, junior. My senior year was my best year by far with my teammates going to the NCAA tournament. But we had 6 seniors. So we were loaded up with seniors. And actually that was a great joy. We had a lot of fun together. That was a very special year.
So as a coach, you spent a lot of time scouting players, scouting teams, and coming up with game plans. If you were going to go back and scout your Northwestern team, what's the scouting report on you as a player, looking back on your college days there?
Okay.
What would you force yourself into? What were your weaknesses? What would you have game planned against yourself?
Okay, we never have weaknesses, right? Okay, this is before the three-point shot.
Right.
Okay, so I was a shooter, and I did have a fair amount of quickness to my game, but obviously there's a lot quicker players, out there. So for me, you would just body me up with a very quick player and, really not allow me to penetrate with my right, make me go left, body up, and don't give me any open shots. I mean, I open shots by your senior year, open shots are in. Right. Like if you're left open, it's in. And you get a really good feeling because that's kind of what the pros are, right? Except they have the contested shots that are in. But we had great ball movement and we played well together. I think we had 4 people or 5 people in double figures. But I think for me, I could draw a really quick defender, be denied a lot, have to play physically. I played some point guard, but my ball handling skills needed to improve. So I really needed better ball handling skills, more strength. I was kind of a thin player. I was strong. I mean, I benched, I think 130 that year, which my weight was about, I was about 135. That was a little, for 5'9" at Division I, you're going to get banged around a lot.
Right.
And so I think that I should have been a little bit, had more muscle mass, and I think quicker off the bounce and forced me left. And I was a real competitor, so you could talk to me and I'd talk smack. so we could get into that as well.
Okay. It sounds like it's the Portland game plan. They would have followed you to Northwestern and just, same idea, just be rough, be physical with you.
Well, they double teamed, and I tell you, Ed Feeney, it was like, go get that girl, like under any circumstances. So I had 2 and 3 people on me in that game. But the one thing about the higher level is that they can't do that, right? You can't be double teamed and not like that. And that Portland game was something else. I remember that well.
We talked about your high school days, and you could recall like the games that hurt. But how about in college? Like looking back on your college years, you mentioned senior year being good. You're all Big Ten honorable mention. I saw that you guys made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Do you have any games that kind of stick out looking back as a player? Like that was really cool, and that's something I'll remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I do. There are a couple of games that really stuck with me as a player. Playing against the great late Pat Summitt. Tennessee came to Northwestern. I can't remember what year it was, but I never was recruited by Tennessee. Okay, and Tennessee, was the thing. I mean,
Right.
Pat and her program was something else, and I just was so fired up to play against Tennessee that, like, if I scored a bucket, I looked at Pat. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was sort of like I could have played for you. I mean, I was really fired up by that, and actually, it was one of my best collegiate games statistically. We lost by, I think, 3. And it was an incredible game. So I'll never forget the Tennessee game. And I'll also never forget USC with Cheryl Miller.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because that was back in the day.
Right.
And I remember I had to guard her. I'm guarding Cheryl Miller, which was interesting. And I wasn't the only one who guarded her, but we took 2 charges on her. What I can't remember, I thought I took one of them. I don't know. I thought I took one or both. I'm not sure. But anyway, we were in a great game with Cheryl Miller. We also lost that game, but it was super close. There was also a game where Tara Vanderveer was at Ohio State. And so she had this amazing team. And it was a home game. And Tracy Hall was a fabulous player on her team. And we were tied. And they had the ball on the sideline. And they ran a back screen for this incredibly athletic player. And what I can remember about it was, as she was jumping to leap for the ball and going to like tap it in, I thought to myself, this is so unfair. There's absolutely nothing we can do about that. Like she elevated right over everyone. And so we lost to Ohio State, like on that play. And I remember thinking, wow, what a play, like to run, and what a player.
Yeah.
So, Tara Vanderveer endorses this book. This all comes back around, and coaching against Tara in college, right? Whether it was Maine, Michigan State, or Duke. So she comes back around, working with her with the USA basketball. And of course, Coach Summitt, comes around because I'm in Auburn, and she ends up being a reference for my job at Maine. And then, of course, in the semifinal, we have that huge comeback. So I feel very fortunate to have these like sort of things like me as a player and as a coach, and things just have a way of reconnecting and coming back around.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like you probably had no idea at that time, like you'd run cross paths with these people 15, 20 years later down the road, and it's crazy to think that.
Yeah, it is. And the greats. I mean, Pat Summitt to me is the greatest coach of all time because of what she started. Remember driving the bus, we're doing the laundry. It's the whole continuum of her influence. Yes, it's the eight national titles. I get that. But, it's not a matter of counting wins and national titles. It's a matter of the impact from the very beginning. Like no one made impact like Coach Summitt if you go way back.
Right.
And there are some great coaches now, Tara Vanderveer is up in 1,000, whatever. I mean, and, Gino is doing his thing. And I have all respect for that, but they can never be what Pat did for the whole game, and how many people she has in coaching to this day, or just being at UT Martin, and coming into this thing at 23, I think it was, and then going to where she went, God bless her. I think about her a lot because the commitment we make for so many years, and then she didn't get a chance to have that other life. Do you know what I mean? That other mentorship life, or writing a book and that type of thing.
You mentioned all these great coaches, and I wonder where did the coaching bug come from you? Like, is that something you thought about, in college? Like, after I'm all done playing, I think I want to still be connected to the game, or did you have other aspirations getting out of college? Like, how did you wind up? You wound up at Auburn as an assistant coach, but what was the process to get there?
Oh, it's a process.
Yeah.
I'm a coach by accident.
Okay.
I mean, in high school, my coach, Fred Kerber, the first Coach K in my life, he said to me, after watching me coach in a summer league or something with young kids, he said, coaching might be a great, craft for you. And I grew up in Brunswick, like Bowdoin College, like academic influence,
Yeah.
in the town. And then going to Northwestern, it's kind of socialized out of you. Like it doesn't, when you're having get-togethers with people or a party, people say, I'm going to be a doctor. No, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be an act. Like Northwestern's great on actors, right? Great school. Lot of great, like Julia Louise-Dreyfus comes out of Northwestern. Charlton Heston comes out of Northwestern. Okay. So it was sort of like, you can't say that and be cool. You can't say, I'm going to be a coach, right? I mean, I'm going to get my MBA. I'm going to get my PhD. And so there was a little bit of this, I don't know, social climbing like in our goals. And so, of course, for me, I settled on being an attorney.
Okay.
I was going to be an attorney. And then I worked in a law firm in downtown, which was great people. But when they buried me in a room and told me to go through 12 boxes to find this one document, I'm thinking, okay, I can't do this. This is not for me. So I had that wonderful experience there. And then I was really lost. And I just said, well, I'll go get my MBA. I worked in sales, marketing for a telecommunications firm in Chicago, stayed in the area. And then, to be quite honest with you, Chicago got too cold. I was like a Mainer, in Chicago, and I'm like, I am so done with this.
Yeah.
And these are simple truths. Like I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. So I looked at two schools, Auburn and Vanderbilt, and both warmer weather. And I chose Auburn without seeing it, sight unseen, because I knew Vandy was the better academic school. But the gentleman at Auburn was leading his team to the national championship. And this story is also in the book, it's my dad who says, well, what do you want to do? And I say, well, I want to see what big time athletics is all about. He said, well, you just answered your question.
There it is.
Go on and drive your cranberry Volvo, your beat up cranberry Volvo, second and third hand from Chicago to Auburn. And I guess I never looked back.
And one of the things you were responsible for was recruiting, right? So you had to jump on the recruiting trail and you were responsible for some great recruiting classes. What was it like recruiting back then? It wasn't planes and you didn't have the internet and stuff like this. So it was probably hopping in the car, driving across the South and just trying to find these players, right? What do you remember most about some of these early days on the recruiting trail?
Well, for 2 years, I was a graduate assistant. So I just had to listen to the other assistants and do whatever work they told me. And I couldn't be off campus. So for 2 years, I was doing all the on-campus recruiting and scheduling of all sorts of appointments. And then I got the full-time job. And all I can remember is, first of all, you had to get directions. Like you get lost in the middle of Georgia.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have anything. You have to stop at a gas station and say, I'm trying to get to this high school over here. In AAU ball, you waited in lines to talk to the coach. Okay, so coach ends the game. There are 25 coaches lined up to wait their turn to say a quick hello to that AAU coach. Did I mention no directions? Okay, so I mean, no
GPS, no smartphones.
No smartphones, no cell phones, no internet. Everything's note taking. I mean, when people today try to tell me recruiting's hard, I'm like, I can't even comprehend that. Yes, we did fly people in a lot, but I did a lot of driving. Driving to Georgia, driving to Florida, driving to Louisiana, Mississippi. I mean, you can imagine the Maine girl, goes south.
Yeah.
And I loved it. So funny how people are. I love the people. I love the warmth. I love the diversity. I love Southern food. Grits and shrimp and grits and gosh, all sorts of things that are so good. So anyway, it was an incredible experience.
And you mentioned that you wound up getting the full-time assistant gig. What can you say about the importance of kind of working your way up? A lot of times people just want everything now. They want it quick. They just want to be handed things. But what can you say about the importance of being an assistant coach, getting all those extra additional duties, maybe doing things that aren't so glamorous? Like, how did that mold you and get you ready to become a coach?
Yeah, you really have to be humble and learn that anything is a great job for you. Sweeping the floor, great job. Do it in the best way possible. We did those things. We slept floors. I had to check classes. I had to sit in on a class with one student athlete just because to keep her focused. I mean, there were so many things that we did that were detail oriented and never questioned. I went into it wanting to learn. I can't tell you how many people come into coaching as assistants and all they want to do is like bring you what they know, except they know nothing.
Right.
I mean, if you have not sat in the coach's chair and won championships, you need to be quiet. Like you need to listen, you need to learn. And that's really gone away. That was actually a turnoff to this day and age about coaching. Like everyone knows better. But they don't have experience. They've never been a head coach, never won a championship in their life, but they're going to know better and not learn. And I think what I did was I didn't know any better. And so with Joe Champy, I learned everything he taught me. I absorbed it. I paid attention to practices and everything he did. Now, I always knew I'd add my own flavor, like when I became a head coach. But assistant coaches make suggestions. Head coaches make decisions. Big difference. So you're looking, and loyalty is really marked more by, well, what are you going to give me? What's my salary? What's my health care? And when do I go on vacation?
Right.
I've actually had people ask me that in an interview. And I'm like, you're interviewing for a position to work in this program and you're asking about vacation time.
Right.
That's it. That's a no hire.
I'm guessing I didn't get the job.
No, and Joe always taught me, Joe Champy, and he's in the book, taught me about working by objectives. We're 24/7. If you're expecting like time, you commit to a lifestyle with coaching. You can, John, my husband always used to laugh as I was a coach, and especially a head coach. We try to have one day off, like say it's Sunday.
Yeah.
And what would I be doing? Watching film. And he'd say, now you're telling me you have a day off. Like you don't have a day off.
Yeah.
And you work by objectives. Even having children, I could block out time, be with my children, from 5:30 to 8:30, but you're working the rest of the time. We did the dinners, I gave the baths, I was a mom and got the kids to school and, picked them up, whatever. But the point being is the kids go to bed. You don't go watch Dynasty. Remember that show, Dynasty?
I've heard of it. That was before my time. I know you're talking.
You don't go, you go back to notes, you go back to recruiting calls, you go back to all that stuff. All that.
Also, you were a great player, and transitioning from being a player to a coach, when you play, you have a direct impact in the game. You're out there, you're making the plays, either good or bad. But being a coach, you don't have as much direct impact. It's kind of up to your players to make things happen. Was that tough at all, being a coach and like not having as direct of an impact or imprint on the game, like being a player?
For me, the practices were my games, right? I had to have the team ready and be super organized, and also make sure. What I see a lot happening, which is kind of funny to me, is that a coach blasts in there and they have their own philosophy, right? Well, your philosophy is important, but it's also dictated by your talent and the people on the floor. So your offensive philosophy, changes every year based on who you have. Your defensive philosophy can stay a little bit more consistent. We were multiple and did lots of things. But what I'm saying is I think the very best coaches can take any team and make it a successful team. In this day and age, it's funny. It's like, oh, well, I'm a man-to-man coach, so I can't coach this team. And, I'm thinking, okay, well, then that means you're limited.
Yeah.
I think that what I learned from Joe and what I learned from Pat Summitt, like watching, and Sue Gunter, another great, the late Sue Gunter at LSU, what I learned was they were going to do whatever it took, X and O wise, to win.
Right.
If I had to go man-to-man full court, that's what I'm doing. And my team's going to understand that. If I had to play a matchup because I play that. If I had to set more screens in a game for my shooters because they could not get open, I do that. Now it's like the dribble drive offense. It's for everybody.
Yeah.
Like how could it be for everybody?
That's the flavor of the month right now.
Oh God, these flavors. And I think that if you're a great coach, like I don't know, you have all flavors. You can do anything. You have jump defenses, you have your matchups, you have your presses, you have your man-to-man, you have your, that's what I learned. In my championships and our success at Maine with those women, or at Michigan State, or at Duke, I learned you had to kind of be a person who would work with your group. And then the key is letting go. And that was a challenge too, right? You get a player like Chelsea Gray. How good is Chelsea Gray? She only played 2 years at Duke. because of injury. When Chelsea Gray got injured, we were number 2 in the country, fighting there with Connecticut. And so you then have players like Chelsea Gray, Amy Vachon, Cindy Blodgett, Kristen Haney at Michigan State, that kind of, Lindsey Bowen, that sort of lighten you up as a coach. And those kids take you for a ride. Like, it's sort of like, sit down, Coach P, we got this covered. and those are my best teams. I mean, those were always my best teams, where I could give them stuff, and then they could roll with it and not needed to be motivated, and then could bring their talents. Jasmine Thomas, another one at Duke. Haley Gorecki, another one at Duke. Those players are really high level, and you got to kind of guide them and then know when to let go.
You mentioned how when you came up as an assistant, your job was to listen, right? And just take it all in. When did you know that you had listened enough and you were ready to have your own program? And how did Maine come calling? I'm curious how this all worked out, because Maine was doing great. I looked it up. They had some 21 seasons in conference championships before you arrived. So how did that job open, and how did you know you were ready to take that leap?
Well, that job opened, I don't know, because it opened. I don't remember the details of why it opened exactly. What I did know was I wanted to be a head coach, and that being an assistant was good, but I wanted to be a head coach. I wanted to try to have a team and try to make decisions with a group of women and work with women. And I saw the value of being a head coach. So I was only an assistant coach for 2 years as a GA, and 1.5 years to 2 years as an assistant. And then I was fortunate. Mike Plosick was the AD, terrific person, terrific AD. He's at Maine. I think there were some struggle seasons. I think there was looking for a change there. I'm not sure what the deal was at the end there, but I was 26 and the job opened in my home state. I had my MBA. That was very helpful. I tell a lot of young people to get their advanced degrees because it made a difference for me. And I took the job, and I think my oldest player was 22. So I was 26 and just learning a great deal. I mean, nothing can prepare you, no matter how well you're prepared, for the seat.
Right.
I worked too hard. I was wanting it too badly. I talk about that in the book, like going, just too much, like get some balance here, enjoy the ride. But we were bound and determined to make, Maine, put Maine on the national scene. That's for sure.
So you were coming from Auburn, where you guys were making deep tournament runs. You get the gig at Maine, and then your first season, you win 9 games. Any thought, were you doubting yourself at all? Were you like, what did I get myself into here?
We were, and mind you, we were 0-9.
I didn't know that. I just saw the overall record.
Okay, our season started with Florida International, top 25 team at home. No, Boston College with Sarah Bain, one of the greatest players in history, lost at Boston College. Then we had Florida International, top 25. And then we went to a tournament, played Texas, played Rutgers. I forget, like the schedule was
just
out of something. And then we lost some other, I can't remember, you'd have to trace it. But our first win was in the pit. In the pit, I believe, Dartmouth, to give us our first victory. And then we went 20-7 the next year, and were kicked out of the tournament because of a scheduling error.
Oh.
So we were the number 1 team in the conference the very next year.
Yeah.
And the coaches got together and said, well, they scheduled one too many games. This was before you had computers. This is before you had, you had administrators, but people weren't really looking at those things, right? And I had a new assistant. I was a new head coach. We're kind of scheduling these games. And anyway, we're the number 1 team, and they booed us.
I didn't know about that one.
They booed us out, and we don't get a chance. And boy, was that that's the most painful thing I've ever gone through as a coach, to take full responsibility for that, and to know, though, that I needed backing on that one. And then that was my first 2 years. And for 6 straight years, we took off like a house of fire. Beat Alabama, beat Stanford, beat whomever. And so it was 6 straight NCAA tournaments after the nightmare.
It should have been 7. Should have been 7 in a row.
It should have been 7. Yeah.
Before we get to those great teams, you brought up something that I want to ask you about. This is one of my questions I wanted to ask. So you mentioned being at Maine and playing tough non-conference schedules, right? You're usually just the throw-in game that these big teams want in the beginning of the year. But you've been on both sides as a coach at Maine, but also being at some Power 5 conference schools at Michigan State and Duke. So what's more stressful, like playing these big teams at Maine and possibly getting blown out, or is there more pressure being like a Duke at Michigan State and then possibly losing one of those games and hurting your resume come tournament time down the road? Like, what's the worst position to be in?
Good question. Okay, you're supposed to treat every game the same, first of all. Not possible, right? Because you have different things. When you're an underdog, the underdog mentality is a more freeing mentality. I mean, let's just face it. People don't expect you to win, right? So you want to show people. You want to show, you're going to take a look at us. So that underdog mentality really was through Maine, right? People didn't expect us to beat Stanford. They didn't expect us to do. I mean, we had the overtime with Georgia, with the twins. I mean, Coco and Kelly. I mean, we did so many things at Maine that were and when I say we, remember, it's the women in the book. Like, they're all in there. Okay, this is not a singular thing. It's very plural. But so underdog mentality. But, and then there's a top dog mentality when we were leading the conference, right? And I think the best coaching is that there's a no scoreboard mentality and that you try to remove these top dog. Like, you're supposed to be the very best every time you hit the floor. And so you try to get your team in that mindset. But it's very difficult. And I'll give you a great example. Duke coming to Maine when we almost lost that game.
Yeah.
Classic. I mean, classic. We're Duke. We're good. I mean, we were young and had some issues, but Maine, and then Maine really should have won that game. I mean, they had a nice look at the end there. So the expectations are much higher at Michigan State, much higher. I mean, at Duke, okay, just forget it. Losing any game, you're the worst coach in the world. I mean, and I've seen it happen to the greats like Coach K or. I mean, it's amazing the kind of scope you're under. It's like national championship, Final Four, or forget it. And that was really a lot of the Duke experience, which I was excited for, though, because after coaching a national title at Michigan State, I was like, okay, let's see what this is all about. And at Michigan State, we were mid Big Ten, and we did it in 5 years. So people, I mean, what could they say, right? I mean, 5 years we're playing for a national title. So that was just utter bliss. I mean, that thing happened so fast with Michigan kids, a couple kids from away. I mean, that was just a blur. And, beating, Vandy, Connecticut, Stanford, Notre Dame in the same year, like that was just an incredible season. And then Duke, we, 4 straight Elite Eights at Duke. Then the conference changes. Okay, I mean, check this out. So just when you're dominating, here comes Syracuse, here comes Notre Dame, and here comes Louisville.
Yeah.
I mean, changes the whole dynamic. And one of the reasons I felt really good about stepping away when I did was we had just finished 3rd in that league behind Louisville and NC State. And to me, I was like, wow, I didn't mind people. When we lost games in December, I was the worst coach in America. Should never be at Duke, go away fast, whatever. And then we had the greatest comeback in the history of the ACC. I mean, going from 10th to 3rd through January and February. So at some point, you got to be just loving the game of coaching. You got to love the kids. You got to love the process because, top dog, you've seen the top dogs, like they're up 20, but then the team starts catching up and then they start missing shots that they were making. I mean, that's the front runner mentality,
right,
where I got to be up 20 and when I'll beat anybody. But then you see that so much with the guys' teams, right? I don't know, some teams up 20 and then this team from Loyola, whatever, starts coming back and then you see them going, oh, this can't be happening. Like you can see it in the eyes of some of those schools. So I just want to be the every game mentality.
Probably the right mentality to have right there.
Yeah. Anyway, I could talk too much here because I could talk all day about it.
You mentioned kids, like you've had a bunch of great kids, and at Maine, Cindy Blodgett was that player, right, who kind of came in and just helped take the program to another level. At what point did you know what you were getting? Did you know when you were recruiting her that it was going to be that case, or did you see it, when she got on campus? What were your original thoughts recruiting her and getting her there to campus?
Oh, this is very easy answer. I think her first game ever as a freshman, we're going to run a play, and she just shot and made a three. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. Because we're actually running something, and Cindy's an amazing person. And I mean, the work that she put in to become the player she became was extraordinary. The four straight, so much was on her, on her to perform all the time. And that's what made her great. And that's what was amazing. I mean, Coach Cooper there is great person. And that whole run that Lawrence made, and then also she benefited from some great seniors, the team was willing to play right with her and welcome her. And, she didn't have to go through any kind of pains of, this freshman has to take her time. Like, everybody was so excited to welcome every gift that she had. And so then that was awesome. And then, pulling Amy Vachon in after that, she came, her father coaching her, that was a whole nother story. Trisha Ripton from from Millinocket. Like, there was really interesting stories about different Maine people that were coming to Maine. And Cindy was definitely the biggest recruit. I believe Notre Dame, Colorado, and Maine were her final three schools.
That's crazy. I didn't know who she had to narrow down to. So the fact that she decided to stay home is great. I just got one more question on Cindy. She scored over 3,000 points. Did you hold her back at all? Could she have scored 4,000, or did you just give her the green light?
Well, some lights you don't give, some just are green. No, Cindy, she could create, she had that gift of creating her own shot. Back in the day, look, a lot of people couldn't create their own shots, right? Yeah. And she could create her own shot, and she had that swing release, we'll call it,
It went in.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're not touching any of that. No. Yeah. So she was just getting in, better condition and learning the level of the game and learning how to be denied the ball, getting open, all this kind of stuff, playing on ball, off ball. And all I can say, I certainly hope I didn't hold her back. I mean, she did have 30 against Alabama her freshman year.
So WNBA first round draft pick too. I mean, from Maine, that's crazy right there in itself right there. So
yeah, that was the Cleveland Rockers.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned wanting to build something special, and you guys did. I can remember being a kid and your games would come on TV on Saturday. And I can remember one in particular where we were supposed to go to church in the afternoon. Dad's like, no, we're going to watch the Maine game. We'll go to church tomorrow. Like, that's just the vibe around the state. It was huge. At what point did it sink in, like, wow, like we've built something here. We've got something special here.
Yes, I can remember waiting in the locker room while the team was on the court warming up and looking to my left and seeing all the cars coming in, the headlights, to Alphon, right? We played at the Alphon Arena. And where I stood by the locker room, obviously there were doors, and the cars kept coming. It was my first, this is as we were just building, getting up to 5,000 fans and doing crazy things, but the cars just kept coming. People would drive from all over to see Cindy, to see our team, to see what we were doing. And I remember that distinctly. Headlights, lots of them.
It's coming in, just nonstop.
Just nonstop. And I thought, wow, this is going to be really interesting.
And then you guys ultimately, you mentioned all the tournament runs you guys had. You guys made the NCAA tournament, but you got your first tournament win at Maine, which is, I think, a first in program history. It's got to be, right? So you guys play Stanford.
Yeah.
What do you remember most about that game? And you mentioned, crossing paths with these people from earlier on in your career, and then here comes Stanford and Tara Vanderdeer. What was it like, that game, and winning that? I mean, that had to be an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I think that team made history in the sense I'm not sure any other team has won.
I think that's it. That's still it.
I mean, no, but in the conference.
Oh.
I don't think conference. I mean, I could be. You can check that, but I mean, that team made enormous history. Remember, we were only 3 points away from defeating Old Dominion on their home floor, so that was basically almost a Sweet 16.
Right.
What I can say about that team is Amy Vachon, coach, leader on the floor. I didn't do a lot in that game. That was one of those games where I thought I was going to have to make some big play, big calls, okay, Joanne, get ready for this game. Here we go, And Amy ran the show, made the calls. The team, yes, it was close, but it had to be close. I mean, they were outstanding, that team that they had. Right. I mean, they had 6'4". They had a 6'6" kid who took threes. I mean, there was all sorts of things going on. And what I remember is just about the calmness about it, the leadership on the floor by Amy and her teammates. Jamie Cassidy, huge in that game. Martina Tinklova, huge. And Amy's assist making and scoring, and everyone sort of had key shots. And then, of course, it came down to free throws, go up by 2. They have the ball. I think they have it for like 8 seconds. And they're hauling down the floor, and we're, getting back defensively. And I can remember that ball go up, and I remember you could see the trajectory, and you could say it's not going in. Like you could just tell it wasn't one of those hold your breaths. And then the buzzer went off. And the bedlam that is taken on those films, Amy running across the court with her teammates, like that goes down in history as one of the neatest celebrations ever. And I remember just trying to get to Tara, like, I'm not running anywhere. I'm like, right. Wow, I got to go shake her hand. Like, just being in awe of what my team had done, really. And that was truly one of the greatest moments. I mean, I've had some good ones. I mean, the being at Maine and being able to coach against Tara, and of course Michigan State in that semifinal. I mean, I think that's still a record there, that semifinal comeback for NCAA. And so we've had some good ones, but that one at Maine was between the Alabama one,
right,
which put us, and that Stanford victory. I don't know. You can't get much better than those.
At what point were you thinking you wanted to try to challenge yourself and go beyond Maine? Because I mean that's huge on the resume right there, getting a tournament win, especially over a program like Stanford. But you were there for a couple more years, so when did you start weighing that and possibly wanting to challenge yourself and go somewhere else, go someplace bigger?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that was Amy's junior year that we beat Stanford. Senior year, we lost to North Carolina by 3. That was out at Santa Barbara, and I was going to give birth to my son. And really, you just aspire to challenge yourself. And I never looked at it like being disloyal to Maine. What we felt is we had 8 incredible years at Maine.
Yeah.
And we had really come and done some neat things. And it might be time, I actually turned down the job at Northwestern while I was at Maine, and some other jobs as well. It's because they people come calling it. And I think that when Michigan State recruited us, it was so thorough. Tom Izzo, the whole thing was so thorough. And of course I had to be captivated about going back to the Big Ten. And Tom Izzo just won his first national title with Mateen Cleaves. So there was a lot going on there, and the whole thing just seemed like the right fit and the right place to raise a family. Midwest America, safe, generally, place. And so it just seemed like the thing to do. It was very, very difficult departure from Maine, very emotionally difficult. And the day I told the team, I also gave birth. So it was, I can't imagine 2 events colliding like those did. I mean, I don't recommend that. Emotionally, I was absolutely felt unable to have my son. I was so wiped out from that. I'd come from press conference, driving home, trying to relax and get a sense of it. And then my water broke, and that was like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah.
I can only imagine. That's quite a day right there. That's a day.
That's a full day. That's a full day. Yeah.
Going to Michigan State, Big Ten, bigger budget, different players looking at your program. What was that first recruit that you got that was kind of like, oh man, like we can go and get different players now. Like we're not stuck geographically to maybe looking in New England. We can go and look for players. Who was that player from Michigan State?
Well, I tell you what, we took a good approach. We stayed in the Midwest. We did not try to grow too fast. And so there were great players in Michigan. And people were calling us left and right, got to recruit this kid. I mean, so we're getting a lot of input. But we had a gal down the road, Kristen Haney from Mason, Michigan, literally 15 minutes down the road. Lindsey Bowen, maybe from Dansville, maybe 25 minutes down the road. There's an incredible player up north in Glen Arbor area, Glen Lake, one of the best post players ever. She didn't know it at the time, but physique-wise and everything, Liz Shimmick. So we were able to Victoria Lucas Perry was from more the Detroit area. We took great Michigan kids and then got like Renee Haynes from Ohio, Kelly Rowerig from Nebraska. And so we kept it simple. We wanted to build from inside out. And I remember our first game, I think we had 500 fans. I'm not sure if that's accurate. It was something very small.
Different from Maine too, right? Because you're coming from Pack and Alphon.
Oh yeah, no, Maine, again, saying goodbye to those gals at Maine was incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, yeah, we're back at square one, right? We're trying to build a program, and it was an incredible 5 years. That things fell in place, right? Coaching staff, right, everything, just working together in unison to be able to do what we did. And I don't know how many times that's been done, taking a program that was mid-level to low and bring it to a national championship in 5 years. I don't know. To me, that it was quite a ride, and it was a lot of work and a lot of very good people.
That Final Four run, you run into Pat Summitt, who, just listening to you speak, obviously someone you admire. It's normally traditional. You see the coaches meet at midcourt before games, shake hands, exchange some pleasantries. Do you remember what she said to you? And were you intimidated? That could be pretty intimidating to be going up against Tennessee in a Final Four, and Pat Summitt's coming to you to shake your hand.
Yeah, well, okay. The good news was I had spent that time at Auburn, right? And she was a reference for my head job at Maine. So I was exposed to Pat Summitt and the Lady Vols for a long time. And remember, well, not a long time, but for enough to know the rivalry between Auburn and Tennessee. So there was a rivalry element to that in my head. It's like, wait a minute, I've seen this in action a little bit, and I've watched her from afar and known her a little bit. I didn't know her like really, really. I knew her well enough to ask her for a reference and have that, mentor relationship. But so for me, it was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is just the ultimate. I was very excited about it. Yes, definitely nervous. On my staff, I had Al Brown, who had won national titles with Pat, because he was on her staff before. And so that was kind of, and I also had Samika Randall on my staff who played for Pat. So we had a lot of dynamics going on in that game. And before the game, very cordial. And it's what I said after the game that I remember.
What was that?
Well, okay. So, clock's counting down. You can tell we're going to win. One of my kids gets a steal. With 6 seconds left, she puts it in. This is a game that you can tell is over. Like, you have literally 12 good seconds to process that this game is over and that Michigan State's going to win. And so there's bedlam everywhere. Well, I'm trying to get to Coach Summitt, to Pat, and I did. And she was wearing a white with orange. I remember exactly what she was wearing. And I shook her hand and I said, "I'm sorry." I said, "I'm sorry." Like, I really wasn't apologizing, but I had so much respect for her.
Right.
And I knew what she was going to take for that. I knew the hit she was going to take for that. But I also knew that we were legit. We were legit that year. I mean, we finished the poll number 2. I mean, we were legit. We were a number 1 seed. And I'm not so sure from her kids' vantage point that they realized when they got up 16 that we would fight the way we did. Because it was classic. They got up 16. They got a little comfortable. And we came charging at them at the right time and threw some knockout punches. And I think their team stepped back like, this can't be happening.
And they were good, right? Those are the Candace Parker teams, right?
No, Candace was out that year. That was Anna Sicki. That was Candace was not playing that year. She was, I believe, injured. And I remember Anna Sicki so much because it was such a battle inside. So I don't remember all the players, but Candace was not on the floor during that game.
And then played Baylor in the national championship. Another great coaching giant, Kim Mulkey.
Yeah.
Did it hurt? Like, obviously, it hurts to lose a game, especially national championship. But to go from talking about building that program up and reaching that point, did it hurt as much as maybe you didn't think it would, or was it painful? Like, what was the reaction from losing in a national championship game?
It hurt. It hurt. It hurt a lot because for a couple of reasons. First of all, Baylor was a great team.
Yep.
They had played the game before and defeated LSU. Had a lot more rest time. Had All-American on that team. That was beautiful. We had played the second game, and just had to fight like crazy to come back. There was a sense of relief that you get. The celebration we had after Tennessee was quite a celebration, almost too much to come down from.
Right.
The media kept us till 2 a.m. The turnaround time, very difficult. And we only played really 6 players, sometimes 7. So I knew, I just kind of, it was just tough. You know, I knew we coached the team hard. We got the team ready. We did all the things that we had to do. But it was going to be a really tough thing. We had 2 post players that played against Tennessee and played practically the whole game. You can imagine the physicality of a game with Tennessee. So we were in a tough spot. And then to top it off, a gal who had never broken out, and I can't remember her name, and I can't imagine why I can't remember her name, hit like 5 threes in the first half from 2 feet past the arc. Like,
it's one of those days.
I mean, with everything else going on, they're All-American. Sophia was their All-American, Sophia Young.
Yeah.
And this gal gets hot and transfers and leaves the school the next year. Like, it's just like she had her moment in time. And we, you know, it was never a great game. It was never close. You know, we always fought 12, 10, 20. I think we lost by 20. I can't remember, but it was nothing impressive. You know, we couldn't hang. We had kind of expired. And Baylor was also fantastic. So that was that was a really tough feeling, because you also never know when you're going to get back to that.
How about, we talked about at Maine, how, you wanted to go someplace bigger, maybe challenge yourself and go someplace else. At Michigan State, when did that start creeping into your mind? Or was it just like when Duke opened up, it's just one of those things where you couldn't pass it up? Did you think maybe you were going to stay at Michigan State for a while and just Duke was too good to pass up?
Yeah, I mean, I think Michigan State, absolutely. We were going to stay there a long time. There were all those contract negotiations and stuff at that level. They can get kind of crazy, buyouts, not buyouts. Like, there's all this stuff that goes on contractually. There was always only 2 schools that we would have left Michigan State for. And ironically, they were rivals, North Carolina and Duke. Like, because the Triangle, my husband was a Carolina grad. And so the Triangle was a natural draw. I was recruited to Duke, and his family was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, his mom and dad. And so for us, there was all sorts of reasons to think about those schools, but there were none others that we thought about. So we just basically thought we'd be at Michigan State for our careers, because when do those schools open? Like, never.
Right.
And then Duke opened. And that was
it. No brainer.
Well, it was I made a big mistake calling that my dream job, because my jobs have all been dreams, my dream job. But boy, I got hit hard in that paper. But it was really more my job I couldn't believe job that would ever open, relative to me being recruited by Duke and coming around. And I had read Coach K's books back when I was in Maine. If you recall, his first book came out when I was coaching at Maine. So I had studied Coach K. He's also an Army, a military person. So I was drawn to that, because you have to work well with the men's coach. Like, you can't just show up, and that doesn't work. It doesn't provide what's best for your kids if you can't. And Izzo was great. I mean, we had our times, like, it's like brother and sister thing. So I felt very good about being able to work with Coach K. And I also knew that nothing short of a national championship wasn't going to be good enough. And that's probably right. I was probably right. And so it's not one of, it's much more of an isolated job, because you're trying to do the ultimate, and the ultimate doesn't come around. And here's an irony for you. The closest we got to the Final Four at Duke was 3-point game against Baylor.
Oh, wow.
And Brittany Griner was a freshman.
Yeah.
And so Baylor has not been good to my Baylor's been kind of Kim Mulkey, got to give her credit.
Yeah, got to give her credit.
Mm-hmm.
So Maine was all about building the program up, and Michigan State is all about building the program up. You get to Duke, where they're coming off 30-win seasons. They got players like Lindsey Harding, Monique Curry, Alana Beard, right? And it's like you said, it's win or bust. What was that like in terms of adjustment, where you're going into an environment where I need to win?
Well, I love winning. I felt good about that. At the time, I was the only Final Four coach really looking at able to fit that job. So it was kind of an interesting match because I was, coming off had Final Four experience and also was doing USA basketball that summer. But it's been a thrill to try. It's been a thrill to try to get it done and deal with the adjustment of the conference. The other thing is a beloved coach, their beloved coach, Gail, had left to Texas, right? Okay, so not only was it Duke, but it was hurt players. It wasn't like somebody retired.
Right.
She had moved on to Texas for another opportunity, I'm sure, for things that she wanted to do. So I was coming in, and there were no Elena Beards and Lindsay Hardings on the team. I was coming into a really good team, but no superstars, nobody at that point. And so it was a rebooting in a lot of ways. It was a rebooting, and it was met by great pushback, people that were upset about Gail leaving. And so I was the natural person to not appreciate coming in and taking, Gail's job. So you had wonderful support from some areas, and you had some really not so good things. So it was very extreme in my experience there. But wonderful student athletes. And what the three freshmen that were critical, Jasmine Thomas, Crystal Thomas, and Karima Christmas, they were three freshmen that I came in on. And being able to coach them for 4 years and build with them was a remarkable experience. Not to mention then Haley Gorecki's, Chelsea Gray's, Trisha Liston's, and the people that we brought in after that. Nay Odom, there was just a lot of interesting athletes we brought in, but we really enjoyed those three and being able to take them through 4 years and then add from there.
What's it like being in a program where it's a blue blood, spotlight's on you? You got the North Carolina rivalry. Your games are probably on ESPN at this point. A lot more scrutiny. What was it like just being under that microscope right there? Because it's got to be different than the previous two stops.
Definitely different. I loved it. It's just crazy. We're all so close. Carolina's 8 miles down the road. NC State's 25 miles. I want to say with the teams that I coached at Duke, I'll put my record up against Carolina, against anybody. That's a good record if you want to check that. A lot of pride by our women in that Duke-Carolina matchup. And it is like at Michigan State, it was Michigan and Michigan State, but that's a good, 55 miles apart. It's nothing like, you have neighbors that are Carolina people. Like if somebody brings you a pie and they're a Carolina grad, like you're not sure you should eat it. It's within the neighborhoods of where you live, Duke, Carolina, Duke, NC State, all together. And so it's a really fascinating basketball community.
And then also when it comes to recruiting, you mentioned at Michigan State, you kind of just roped off Michigan. Let's look at these great Michigan players. But in Carolina, you're competing with Duke. Competing with UNC, competing with NC State, trying to get a lot of these same recruits. What was that like? Because that's also got to be different being at a program like Duke where players are looking at you versus you having to go find everybody. How was that a different approach in terms of recruiting versus the other stops?
Well, people would say, wow, it's so easy to recruit to Duke. There's a time out there. Try recruiting against Stanford and Connecticut.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. You're recruiting against the very best. You're going to be the very best. That's how you're thinking. Haley Gorecki, is one of few recruits we got over Connecticut. Kids want fans, right? They want. Now, we had fans relative to support, but Cameron, is smaller. You're talking about when Notre Dame comes in the league, they've got 13,000 fans. You got Louisville coming in the league, they've got, 16,000 fans. Gino's got all sorts of people. And so it's very difficult to recruit because the women want to be on TV, yes, but they also want to be in front of huge audiences. We had some great ones selling out against Carolina, selling out against Connecticut. But still, even when Gail was there, the averages were, not as high as some of these other places. So you really talked about academics and academia. That meant we fought Stanford all the time. West of the Mississippi, they generally got the recruit. East of the Mississippi, we generally did. It's a much harder recruiting dynamic, much harder, much more competition. Just again, coaches that are already national champions, right? No women's coach at Duke has been a national champion, me included in that. Well, you've got Tara winning two or three, Gina, like Pat's going on. I mean, you got so many different elements of big time, and that is much harder, and it's 24/7, and it's, I think, a much bigger challenge because your margins are so much smaller.
What's the one game that hurts the most from your time at Duke? You mentioned getting to, I think, a couple of these, right?
Easy. Baylor. Having a great post player like Crystal Thomas, guarding Brittany Griner, 2 fouls all game, perfectly guarding her, and 2 fouls are called in the last minute 30, and one's a 3-point play. Oh no, I'll never forget it. It was a Big 12 official. Big 12 official makes these calls. And I'm not sure how we could have a Big 12 official in that game, but and basically they win by 3.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been so angry. I've never been so, not on my team, no, so frustrated, so upset about the officiating. And I can talk about this now. No one can penalize me now. So that team was Katura Jackson, Joy Cheek, Bridget Mitchell. I mean, they were the seniors on that team. Jasmine was a great junior. We had really come together over the years playing together, and 3 points away. And that year, Coach K and his team made the Final Four. So for me personally, it was 3 points away from going to a Final Four with the guys, just like we had done it at Michigan State. Because, right. It was incredible thought, and we played our hearts out. But yeah, that had to be the one. Yeah.
So you've been doing this basketball thing for a while now, almost 30 years of coaching. This is your first winter where you're not game planning, you're not traveling, you're not recruiting. Been busy writing the book, but what's that adjustment been like for you? Where it's, I got no practice to plan, I got nothing.
Well, I got a book.
I've got a book, yeah.
Writing the book has been a joy and also a huge challenge to make myself a writer. I mean, right. I've always been a pretty good writer. I credit Northwestern with some great teaching there, but to write a book, I was just looking at the date. I signed on with John Kohler, my publisher, in mid-June, and here we are in January, and the book's coming out less than a year, February 16th, Mom's birthday. And that is a hugely quick thing. To have this book coming out. So I've been absolutely swamped. And plus we moved into a new house, and I'll say I had a cancer scare, I had to get a hysterectomy. My father has passed. I mean, let me tell you.
It's been a year.
It's been quite a year. And I know things will settle down, but after the book, I'll try to be, as best I can, a coach for people, mental health advocate. But it's been a stunner ever since July 1. When I left Duke, never make the mistake of saying extreme comments like, when I left Duke, I said, I'm in great health. I'm in the best health of my life. At the time, yeah. Absolutely true. On July 1, absolutely true. 2 weeks later, hearing loss, they think from coaching and putting those things in your ears.
Yeah.
Okay, got sight problems, don't see as well. Okay, so that I'm working through all that. And then this whole scare, this cancer scare. I mean, like, all of a sudden, everything was wrong. My lower back, and so July, August, September was all health issues. All health issues. I had surgery September 18th. A month later, my dad dies. I get through. This book is going on at the same time. And I'm 55. It's not like I don't know, you can have surgery for hysterectomy anytime, but what I'm saying is it was all a major challenge for me. I've been challenged since the minute I left, and I look forward to a few naps along the way.
Yeah. So the book comes out next month. For those listeners, I got a lot of younger listeners, and they're probably dealing with a lot too with everything going on, COVID, mental health is as important as ever. The book's about your journey with being diagnosed with bipolarism.
Yeah.
What's some things that some younger folks can take away from this book that may be beneficial to them, just with everything going on right now? What are some things they could learn from the book?
I just hope it can be a story. Not too many coaches coming out about bipolar, and my bipolar episodes occur back at the University of Maine. I'm gifted to, very fortunate at Michigan State and Duke. There's no episodes at those two schools. And the Maine women, I think the book is about loyalty. I think it's about loyalty. I think it's about camaraderie. And I also think it's an educational book about mental health and success and kind of seeing the other side. Nobody's perfect. Some people have high blood pressure. Some people have to battle cancer. Some people have diabetes. Well, bipolar is a brain disease. Okay, it's something that's manageable. It's something that we can learn from. And there are too many stigmas and too many communities about it. And so if I can help one person understand and be a little bit more comfortable with it, the book will be a success. Again, it's Secret Warrior, but there are plural. The warriors in the book, it's very plural warriors. And on Amazon, I'm hoping people will pre-order. I want Maine to lead the way here. I want Maine to push this thing into a pre-order bestseller. It's ranked in a lot of rankings, number one here, there, whatever. But I'm counting on Mainers.
I know I'm gonna go pick it up when it comes out. I'm not even gonna wait till it comes out. I'm gonna pre-order it.
You better pre-order, and your listeners better pre-order.
Exactly.
I've learned about this book thing. Pre-orders are everything. It sends the whole momentum for the book. It's really kind of interesting.
So before we get up out of here, I want to just hit on some fun topics, some fun questions before we get up out of here. And my first couple ones are about your process for writing the book. Well, what's your process? Did you write it all out by pencil and paper? Like, did you go old school, write it out that way? Or are you more the type to type it up? What was your approach?
Thank goodness my son was home from Northwestern, because I did not know how to operate a computer at all.
Yeah.
And so he taught me how to set up a Word document, how to save it, how to go from there. So I did type it on my computer, except you can imagine the rate at which I could type. Yeah. There was one time where I lost 4 hours of work.
Didn't save?
It didn't save because I didn't save it and then I hit the wrong button. I literally cried after losing that 4 hours of work right in front of my son, who rebooted me and said, well, if you wrote it once, you can write it again. Yeah. No, I had more issues, with technology in writing this book. I am traumatized by technology. Okay, I save more things than you could. I save like incredibly. I save everything. But so I wrote it. I just began, writing it as COVID was. The season ended, right? We never had a chance for the NCAA tournament. Everybody, when the season ended, you do all these Zooms with your team, with recruits, and all that. But there's only so much Zooming you can do. You're not traveling anymore, right? You're at home. You're quarantined, you're this, you're that. Well, I just started writing. I wrote it in 2 months because it was March, April. It was April, May, and June, I signed on with Kohler. So it was fast paced. I had a lot to say. I'd been waiting since I was 39 to write it, was counseled not to write it, but it came at a great time.
And I've always wondered this too, because I read a lot too, and I read a lot of biographies, and I always wonder, like, how do people recollect direct conversations and quotes from 20 years ago? So what are the rules when you're writing a book? Like, if you're trying to write about a specific conversation you have with somebody, like, can you kind of make up what you want, just put it in quotes and it flies? Like, what are the rules to direct quotes, direct conversations from 20 years ago?
I interviewed my own players. Okay, so you interview and you get their recollection and memory, and you share your recollection, and it's not all right, but then the players filled in. So this is a team effort. This is an effort. I've got players from Maine, Michigan State, and Duke. Okay, they're all in the book, and they all have different parts of life that we touch on, and so you really have to interview people. There's a lot of talking, interviewing, and also Ruthie's in the book. One of my point guards I coached at Auburn, and another point guard, Chantel Trimetier's in the book. So you can't have everyone in the book. Okay, right. So you basically have a lot of point guards are in this book. That's a definite theme. There's a lot of point guards in this book. And you try to tell the journey of 28 years through their eyes, what they saw, what I experienced, and kind of pull it all together. But I would never have been at Michigan State or at Duke if I hadn't had certain student athletes at Maine that could work their way through their hard times and mine. Like and and some things I remember why, because they were so, I mean, there's some dark in this book. There's some dark moments,
Yeah.
and it was singed in my brain. Like I could never forget it. I mean, there's certain things that you can never forget. And when I talk to my therapists and people, they often said many times you don't remember certain things when you're diagnosed bipolar. I made a point to write stuff down, and I also made a point to, and then some of them were like, I didn't quite agree with them. Like, you remember bad things.
Yeah.
You remember bad stuff. So it's my story, the best I can share it with my players, and the best they can pull it back. And I think people will find it very interesting, and I think it's a book for everyone. This is not a sports book. This is a mental health book told through sports metaphors. And I just know we can make a difference with COVID. There are so many people that are out there struggling. And I talked to a player yesterday who called me, not my player, from another program. And we have got to, my podcast will be coming up, and I hope I can be some kind of coach, but just for a wider audience.
Okay. What was tougher, writing the first letter of the book, the first word, or picking out the artwork for the cover? Which ones? What was the tough thing to do?
Oh, writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're writing. I mean, the cover. Okay, they, your publisher has a lot of say. The thing is, if anyone's offended by this book, because they're not in it or something, remember your publisher gets to edit, right? You're working with John Kohler Books, right? So you got all the. I mean, it went through 2 editors, and I had to re-edit it, all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of teamwork coming from Kohler Books about it. They did an amazing job off of a picture on the title. I mean, on the cover. I'm very pleased with the cover. And the title was always Secret Warrior. So that never wavered. And the endorsements have been incredible. The people that have come on to endorse it. The writing, oh gosh, the writing is hard. I mean, to get it right, and I'm not a literary great or anything, but I wrote the book, and I want it to be great writing. I don't want people to say, I want people to feel good about how, not just the topic, but how it's written. So that's writing. Writing's difficult.
Okay. You mentioned you shared office space with 2 great coaches on the men's side, Tom Izzo of Michigan State, Coach K of Duke. Who's the more pleasant co-worker within the office? Like who's more fun to be around in the office space?
Well, first of all, Kate didn't share office space, right? I mean, my first year at Michigan State, we did just for a second, but then we built this monstrosity of they built it and I enjoyed it. The monstrosity we had for the offices, and the same with, Mike, we're separate. All I can say is they both offered me so much, Mike, I mean, basically, Tom was there when I was trying to build, right, and take a program to a place it's never been before. He had already been there.
Right.
Definitely a big brother, definitely willing to give me some tidbits, watch practice, have some thoughts. Definitely. I go now to Duke, and I've been a Final Four coach and Elite Eight coach, but trying to win a national title and get over the top of that. Well, Coach K had already done that. So there are things that he offered that were very, very important as well. And remember, Coach Izzo had won the national title, but that was right as I was coming in.
Right.
In other words, I was no part of seeing that. That's what I'm no part of seeing. Although Mateen Cleaves is a great guy, and then Kyrie is my favorite coming out of Duke. I mean, Kyrie's just, there's so many good ones, right? But he was special. I know he was only there a year, but watching the dynamics of Coach K and what he did, I mean, what can I say? They're Hall of Famers. Very difficult to compare. Tom shows his emotions more coaching. He stands up and gets, Mike, he's sitting down more, but he's bubbling over, so they're both extremely intense, and obviously have had incredible careers. And, Coach K is called the GOAT, right? The greatest of all time, looking at the numbers that he's done, plus his Olympic success. So all that they've done is earned by them. That you can't compare. They've done amazing things.
What's the better home environment? Alphon when it was packed in the mid-'90s for the Maine teams, or Cameron with the pack house with some of your great Duke teams? What's the better home environment?
In Cameron, it's like the floor vibrates. So a sold-out Cameron, 9,200, is the most incredible experience ever. Alphon, you could only sell out at 5,600, and the fans were a little bit away. Okay, had almost 17,000 in Breslin, which is pretty cool for women's games, but still a little bit further away. When you're in Cameron, that place, again, the floor almost vibrates. The noise, the volume, I don't think I've ever experienced anything like that.
I popped in there one day to check it out, and I was so mad because they had the lights turned off and it was like dark, but you could still just get the feel like this. It's a special place. It's a special, special place. Part of the deal with being a big time coach and being on ESPN and stuff like that is you get these sideline interviews. How do you feel about sideline interviews? Were they a complete waste of time? Do you just say the same thing every time? Do you ever put in thought into what you're saying? Or is it more so let's just get this over? I got to get back to the huddle here.
That came on later in my career.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have that as much. The funniest thing that happened was a reporter getting in my huddle and then telling everybody on TV what I said in the huddle.
Oh.
I mean, that was a classic. Okay. I mean, so that would be the worst offense I've ever seen. I mean, literally taking me verbatim and saying, well, Coach P said this. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. You do what you have to do with media. They should not do that. They should not listen to a huddle and say it in a way that is completely personal or whatever. But generally media they're part of the process, and you're grateful to be covered. Right? You want the coverage. So you do what you have to do.
My last one for you here. Which coach did you like to go up against the most? Like, obviously I could tell you're a competitor, so you want to play against the best. You want to coach against the best. Is there one that just brought the fire up out of you that you just got so pumped up to coach against? Is there that one coach?
When I was a younger coach at 39 in the Final Four, I can tell you Pat Summit got me really fired up at 39. I remember the time we beat Gino, which I think was one time, that was at their place in the Hartford Civic Center. That was exciting. That was exciting because, again, I was younger at that time. Obviously, it's the victories you're going to remember there, right? Because there's plenty of defeats, right? I mean, but I think also too, just, Tara was special to me because she's such a great coach. And we had success against Tara at Maine with one victory.
Yeah.
At Michigan State with a really big victory because it sent us into the Final Four. And then one time at Duke. And so with someone of her stature and how incredible she is, I think, and then of course seeing her with the Olympic team and all that she did and being able to do USA basketball, I think she's it for me. Like, in terms of somebody who's just incredible. I could never, ever match up to her level. And, her longevity, her success. But I love the fact that at 3 different places, we one time were successful. And I can hold that memory because coaching against her is a definite chess match.
I believe it. That's a good one right there. I thought of 2 more quick ones for you real quick. What's the closest you ever got to having recruited a kid from Maine to come to either Michigan State or Duke? Did it ever happen? Anyone ever pop up on the radar from Maine?
Yeah, yes, it did. Sarah Marshall, a great player who went to Boston College.
Yeah.
We weren't able to execute that, but looked at her at Michigan State. And there's the gal, the wonderful player at Indiana right now out of Maine.
Mackenzie Holmes?
Thank you, Mackenzie. And
yeah.
we did not do our due diligence on her. She was definitely Duke material. And so we didn't do it. And I don't know if and with my nieces and, them, we just let that be a family thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's separate, that's family. So never my nieces, but I don't know if I've forgotten somebody, but Mackenzie really sticks out now because of what she's doing with Indiana.
It's incredible. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
And then my last one for you, your Twitter handle is Coach P. Why is it Coach P? Why isn't it Coach PM or Coach JPM? Like, why'd you set it with Coach P?
Well, okay, now it's Coach P for life.
Okay, Coach P for life now.
Yeah, now, but you're right, Coach P, because my maiden name is Palumbo and I'm a Paisan. And
that's what I figured. I figured it's just from being the maiden name, but it's still to this day, it's still Coach P, right?
Yeah, I'm still Coach P. Happy to be called Coach P for life. Now, hopefully, I can coach a broader group of folks, offer what I can about mental health. Can't wait to be back in Maine for book signings and see people. I can't, for COVID, our health, for everybody to move forward, to be out again. I'm really hoping and praying that we all get to that space. But for right now, I'll Zoom like crazy and meet people like you.
Absolutely. I thought of one more. I swear it's my last question. I just thought of one more good one. During your time at Maine, who was like the Maine super fan? Who was like this, like the kind of like the Maine celebrity who was the super fan for the Maine women's program?
Well, I mean, Stephen Tabby King and others. We had some great fans, though. I mean, we were very fortunate. A lot of great fans. Super.
Okay. Thank you, Coach, for coming through on Big Time. This was huge for me. It's been a huge honor. Is there anything we missed? Is there anything you want to touch on before we get up out of here? Is there anything else?
No, I think we got it covered, and I got to get to my next appointment.
I appreciate you making the time for us. That's going to do it for this week's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Coach P for coming through. Super Warrior out February 16th, right? Go ahead and pre-order it everywhere, and we'll be back next week with another Big Time episode of Big Time Hoops, the podcast. Thank you, everybody.